Welcome to Apadmi Asks, where we ask questions which aim to spark interesting conversation about the world of technology.
Should you turn it off if your most useful customers are using it? Probably not.
We're now working with our clients who are saying we've got data in various systems, high volumes of data, and fundamentally we've got too much.
It's about getting inside the heads of users and figuring out how they're thinking.
It's the customer expectation constantly changing, and we have to meet those demands.
I'm Jake Sargent, Group Content Director at Apadmi, and I guess the first question might be, why are we doing this? Well, Apadmi is a digital product company, so we are fascinated by the world of technology and the role it plays along with digital platforms in people's lives. And the question that we're asking today is, data or design? What's really driving digital products? And you'll be glad to know it's not just me asking or answering that question. I've got a very helpful panel here to help get into the depths of it. So here we've got Muktar Mahama, who is head of product at the Very Group, and then making the case for data is our head of performance, Matt Hunt, and then making the case for design is our creative director, Matt Harney. So the scope for Apadmi Asks is clearly to get into the depths of that question that I've just posed, but actually there's some other regular questions which are kind of helpful to just kick off with, where we can get into a little bit about the products that you guys use and what you think is interesting and of note in the world of digital. So the first one is, what app do you use and love the most? And why don't we start with you, Matt, at the end?
The problem I've got is I've got three categories for this, which is really, really sad. They're the apps that I need to use. So now my life is controlled by apps. So I've got an electric car. I have to have my app to use my car. I haven't got a key for it, so I guess I have to use that all the time. I've got apps that I kind of have to use. So if I go into my iPhone and say which of the apps I'm using most of the time, they're all my productivity apps at work, Google Sheets, Google Drive and stuff like that. But the one that I probably can't live without is Audible. I do a lot of commuting, a lot of traveling, and I churn through audiobooks on a week-by-week basis. So the one for me, if you had to take it away, I would fight you for it, would be Audible.
Yeah, nice. Bit of utility, bit of entertainment.
Yeah.
What about you, other Matt?
I think one that I would go to a lot is my Starling app, the bank card one. I used to have Monzo, and that was really good. And then Starling came out, and some of the stuff that they were doing, I thought, actually, this is the one for me. You never know, over the next few years, might switch over. Yeah, Starling app.
And Mark, any favourites for you?
Yeah, well, I definitely use the Audible app on commute as well. But I thought I'd narrow this down to my two probably most useful ones. Okay. The first one is Monzo, so it's a Starling. I guess the reason I like it a lot is the ability to budget properly with the use of things like pots, and I'm actually a Plus member of Monzo, so I can use my pots as virtual cards and pay directly from them, and that's really useful. The other one is my MyFitnessPal. So I'm a bit of a fitness fanatic, and I always like to find things that help me either do fitness much easier or focus on nutrition. And in this case, MyFitnessPal is incredibly easy to help me stay on track on top of my my diet, as an example. So just being able to scan a food item and understand what the amount of carbohydrates, protein and fats you're consuming, it's brilliant for me. There's
a definite thread of usefulness coming through all of that, isn't there? And that really does kind of, I guess, illustrate the role that technology plays in all of our lives. Is there also a piece of technology that you can't live without? So, and that doesn't necessarily need to be software, it could be hardware related. And I guess everyone defaults to the phone, which clearly is there. But are there other pieces of technology that you guys find really important?
Well, again, I was thinking about this question, and I, technologies throughout my life, I wear it, I use it all the time. So I go back to one of my passions is sailing, and I look at how technology's changed the sailing world. So we've had paper charts in sailing since 1750, and I think by 2026, paper charts will be phased out within sailing. Wow. So within my lifetime, I've been on a boat where I've had no global positioning systems to these things called decker navigators, really flaky things that used to give you position based off buoys to satellite navigation. And now, for the first time, I'm seeing paper charts, which is, I've always associated with boats disappearing and going to will all be digital. So it's almost like when you're on a boat now, and if you're offshore, you have to have technology. Really weird thing to think about, for me anyway.
Which could be a bit scary if actually batteries go or connectivity goes and suddenly not having the...
Exactly.
Yeah. What about you, Matt?
We got 2 kids, getting too big for the old car. We needed to get a bigger car, and there's always those tiers of cars you can choose from. It's like the bog standard ones, the middle one, and everything. And the main thing we wanted in that car was, and it's somewhat mobile related, was the CarPlay stuff. In the past, you got what you got in the middle, where it's just a few knobs and dials, or it was a bit of a rubbishy touchscreen that kind of lagged behind your finger. But now it's become almost normal now for most cars to have that plug-in thing, and there's so much functionality that a phone can add into a car now that when they said what do you need in the car aside from reversing camera, it was it's got to have CarPlay in there.
I'm waiting for them to invent noise cancelling rear seats.
That's right.
Just for families.
Just to drown out the "are we nearly there yet?" Absolutely. And again, if we bring on to the third question for you, Mark, 'cause it starts to then lead us into the topic that we're here to talk about, which is around where you think technology is having the biggest impact in your organisation and in our industry, and clearly because you work for Very Group in retail, that is actually an industry that touches most of our lives because most of us buy stuff. So is there something that you're seeing kind of happening that's moving that forward?
Yeah, I suppose you mentioned the Very Group, so we're a pure play, so we don't have stores. Our stores are online, so we are technology, and the only way our customers interact with us is through our websites and our apps. There's an abundance of choice that customers have today that we always have to keep on top of how we improve the experience to keep them coming back. One of the things that we're noticing is the customer expectation constantly changing, and we have to meet those demands. An example I use as a colleague of mine flew on a 2-hour flight about 5 years ago, and there was Wi-Fi on the plane. He expects Wi-Fi now every time he gets on the plane because he knows it can be done. So it's been done before. So it's like, well, why isn't there Wi-Fi on this plane? And we're seeing that when customers are going to other retailers and coming back to us. And the job we have to do is keep up. And the way to do that is through technology. So one of the things that we're doing is we're on a bit of a tech transformation where we're moving our legacy and our monolith technology to something a lot more flexible. So we're adopting more of a Mac architecture. So we're partnering with best-in-breed technologies through product discovery to improve our search, browse, and recommendations experience. We're also looking at partnering with people for content management and also for our commerce tool, or our commerce engine, I should say. So the role technology plays for us is running our business, and how we really see the value that we can drive for customers is by meeting their demands and expectations. And for us, that's moving at pace. And that's the...
And I think that idea of meeting customers' expectations is actually a key part of where this debate, the key question we're asking today is about data or design. Is because ultimately that's what we're trying to do, right? Meet customers' expectations, and which of those, in terms of from a design perspective or a data perspective, is kind of almost jockeying for the top position within that. And the reality is clearly we're using both, right? And all of us know that they both have a role to play. But I think there is something interesting around the way that they work together, particularly around, clearly we are increasingly data-led and there's numbers that are unequivocal and they provide the objective view. It's hard to argue that users are doing this X, Y, Z. But there is also still this element of a subjective point of view from a design angle where actually it becomes more about the colours we use or the experience you have or the way it makes you feel. And bringing those two things together clearly make up the overall experience. Is there, do you think, a scenario whereby one does become more important than the other?
Yeah, I think I mean, ultimately it's a balance. You've got to find a balance between the two. I think rather than being data-led or data-driven, we should aim to be more data-informed. I think we all have past experiences, we have intuition or guts that we have to lean on when making decisions. And you're absolutely right. I think there are times where, yes, you have to go with the data. We have to be grounded in facts and numbers to make a decision. And absolutely, that's key. The thing when you're doing that, though, is making sure you have enough data. Some organizations just don't have the breadth of data to make those calls, and making sure you're not biased and the data doesn't just tell you what you want to know, because at times you can interpret it however you want. When it comes to design, I think this is where we need to have a real balance of qualitative and quantitative analysis or research that support decision making. And by doing that, you're going to have, the ability to create the best experience for customers. A good example I can give you in that is looking at companies who like to take out features because they believe customers don't use it, as an example. And I always go back to how often do you use the airbags in your car? You don't, but it's incredibly valuable. But if you're going with you don't use it enough, you'll take it out. From a design perspective, it's something you can get rid of, right?
If it's not there at the time that you do need it, you're in trouble, right?
Exactly. So I think where data helps is keeping us grounded in facts and numbers to make a decision, and that's absolutely key. When building products and designing products, I think there's a real balance that you need to have between qualitative and quantitative research and data.
And I guess clearly you'd concur with a lot of that, Matt, from a performance perspective in terms of using those numbers to drive the experience. But part of the challenge is around what you actually do with the sheer volume of data that we can access with a lot of the products we're creating, right?
Exactly, and we've if I think about the mobile industry, one of the interesting change that happened in it was the concept of analytics, the concept of understanding initially how your app is performing, how people are using it. And as you get more and more data that comes into play, we're now working with our clients who are saying we've got data in various systems, high volumes of data, and fundamentally we've got too much. We don't know what to do with it. We don't know what view we to take on it. We don't know what's important. We don't know what we're missing. And the interesting thing for me, we've gone through the analytics piece, the industry changing. We're now at a point where we have been for a while, becoming data driven, but in order to understand how things are performing, what is working from a technology point of view or from a user point of view, how is a user behaving when they go through the app, are they doing what we expect, where are the points where we think we've got problems, and using that data to inform us on what next. And then even going to the point where we're starting to play with that, we're doing multivariate testing to say, actually, how can we tweak and work on the 1, 2, 3, 4%, because they are big changes, to our clients. So for me, it's interesting days ahead and times ahead in terms of what we can do. And I think there's huge potential and power available in that data, and I think companies will succeed, not necessarily fail, but companies will jump ahead if they can really exploit the value of that data.
And if we bring in the design element, because clearly data can take us so far, right? But then actually the design and the look and feel of something can be quite polarizing in terms of it being a subjective opinion of I like this color, I don't like that color, or whatever it may be. But it's also such a key part of delivering that overall experience. So how do you make sure that stays to the fore as well, Matt?
The work that we do with Apadmi is we do a lot of work with brand new products coming in from scratch, where we don't have the benefit of data necessarily up front. The kind of data we're looking at is more marketing data that suggests that doing what we're about to do is a good idea. And so we have to fall back more on qualitative research, where we can only get is what are the problems that potentially you guys are having as users. Where can we do things that are going to improve your lives in this particular area, and that part for me is where design, the way we're talking here today, sits. It's not just about look and feel at this point. It's about getting inside the heads of users and figuring out how they're thinking and trying to solve some of the problems for them within the context of the work that's happening. And from a UX perspective, that starts at that user research side of it, and once you get to actual layout and functionality, that's about solving those problems as simply, as intuitively for those users as possible. I think the UI part, that's where we start to bring in more of the brand side of stuff, and that's where I think the experience part really starts to lift out, where we're looking at finish and micro interaction and raising the production quality of stuff so that people feel good when they're using that app. And I think that's where we've got the data side, which is saying there's something potentially going on. So later on, when the product's built and we're getting data back, the data could say we're identifying some potential improvements we can make here. That's on the quantitative side. On the qualitative side, we're saying we're perhaps finding more of the why in that area, and then and what can we do that's actually going to improve that and make it better.
Yeah, just touching on that, I think the power of A/B testing and the power of experimentation. To your point before, is to keep us grounded. From a design perspective, it's easy to fall in love with the things you want to put in front of customers, but actually through testing and qualitative research is how you then validate if it's the right thing to do or not. As humans, we're creative, we have a lot of ideas as product people, but just because we think is the right thing doesn't mean customers are going to love it or it's going to be the right thing for our business.
And I think it's a sometimes fascinating thing to do, because you look at a particular app or a feature and say it's not working, and we say, well, we've got a much better idea, we'll improve it. You put experiments out there and you actually find them much worse.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's really, really interesting to do those small tests to see what, in reality, how users really use your product and what they think about it. It's a very, very interesting area. Yeah.
It's that danger of kind of falling in love with your own idea, isn't it? And just thinking, well, this is definitely going to work, so we need to roll it out. And that whole piece about the emotion is clearly a massive part of the experience too. But I guess the thing that is also interesting is the sway that it can carry when you are the voice of the user, because clearly, any great designer knows that you need to ground it in audience insight and actually user testing. So something else that can be quite a challenge sometimes is where those two things are at odds, as in a small group of users may be saying, but this is terrible, and I didn't like, or I had a really bad experience, and therefore people gravitate towards it. Well, we've got to fix that because everybody's complaining and they're shouting the loudest, whereas the reality is there's a majority over here that are really that can be a challenge, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're spot on. One of the challenges around decision making through data on its own is, especially from a product perspective, is that example where you either decide a feature isn't useful for a group of customers or group of users without considering who you actually built it for in the first place, right? Because it could be that actually, it's a subset of users that we believe are the most valuable customers who are using it, but everyone else is saying we don't want it. And should you turn it off if your most useful customers are using it? Probably not. The other view is actually you have to consider the expertise curve of your customers or your users, because there might be things you build that only when you grow your level of expertise in a product you start to engage with, and for those customers it's really useful, but there might be only a handful of them. So again, I think understanding the why and not just the what is incredibly important, and that's where the power of data and design comes together.
Yeah, and I think bringing that together is kind of a nice way to draw it to a close, because clearly you could go into this in a huge amount of detail, but the reality is they're very constant bedfellows, aren't they? The idea of design and data, and they have to work together. And I guess the kind of overriding piece being don't make decisions without either, right? Well, thank you very much. Really interesting conversation. Just remains me to say thank you to Matt and Mark, much appreciated. Thank you also to all of you for watching. If you want any more information about our Apadmi Asks series, or about our work with Very, or indeed the broader Apadmi work, please check out apadmi.com, and we'll see you next time.